The sunk cost trap. Most people think staying is loyalty. It isn't. Staying because you've already paid? That's a trap. The sunk cost fallacy hijacks your future using your past. The money is gone. The time is gone. Neither returns whether you leave or stay. But your brain doesn't file it that way. It files it as leaving means it was all for nothing. You feel it as guilt, as stubbornness dressed up as grit. You keep going, not because going forward makes sense, but because stopping feels like admitting something painful. Here's the question that cuts through it. If you started today with nothing invested, would you still choose this? If the answer is no, that's not weakness talking. That's clarity. Stop calling it commitment when it's actually fear of loss. They're not the same thing. The spotlight effect. You think people noticed when you stumbled over your words. They didn't. They moved on in about 3 seconds. They were already thinking about themselves again. The spotlight effect is the illusion that you're always being watched and evaluated. You replay that awkward moment for days. You edit yourself in conversations, in rooms, in photos. You make yourself smaller to avoid scrutiny from an audience that has already looked away. Here's what this costs you. Every time you don't speak up, don't try, don't walk into the room, it's not because the risk was real. It's because the audience felt real. And it wasn't. Do one thing today you've been avoiding because of how it might look. The embarrassment you're afraid of lives almost entirely in your own head. Negativity bias. Your brain is not designed to make you happy. It's designed to keep you alive. And those are not the same job. Negativity bias is hardwired. Bad experiences register faster, stick longer, and weigh heavier than good ones. One harsh comment erases 10 kind ones. One bad interaction colors an entire day. This kept your ancestors from dying. But you're not running from predators, you're trying to build a life. And the system is still running like it's 10,000 BC. You don't notice it happening. You just notice that the good days feel blurry and the difficult ones feel sharp and permanent. You notice that realistic often means expecting the worst. Tonight, before you sleep, write 3 specific things that went right today. Not concepts, moments. Do this for 1 week and watch what shifts. Analysis paralysis. Some people can't decide because they're lazy. Others can't decide because they care too much. If you're watching this, you're probably the second one. Analysis paralysis kicks in when you believe there's a perfect answer waiting, and that finding it is worth the cost of standing still. So you research more. You weigh more. You wait for certainty that was never coming. But here's what waiting actually costs. Momentum. Confidence. The version of yourself that learns by doing instead of preparing to do. Decisions made with 70% of the information are almost always better than decisions made after twice the time with 90%. The extra 20% rarely changes the outcome. It just delays it. Pick one decision you've been sitting on. Make it today, not tomorrow. Today. Movement teaches you things that thinking never will. The fundamental attribution error. When you mess up, you blame the situation. When someone else messes up, you blame their character. That gap, that asymmetry, is quietly destroying your relationships. It works like this. Someone cancels plans and they're flaky. You cancel plans and you were exhausted and overwhelmed, and it makes complete sense given the week you've had. Someone snaps at you and they're rude. You snap at someone and you were pushed past your limit. The logic only ever cuts one direction. And it cuts against everyone else. Next time someone frustrates you, ask this before you react. What might they be carrying right now that I can't see? Not to excuse everything, just to stay human about it. You'd want the same. Social comparison trap. Comparison isn't always the enemy. But upward comparison, constant, automatic, against someone's highlight reel, is a slow leak. You see their result and not their process, their surface and not their cost. You measure your ordinary Tuesday against their best moment. And then you wonder why you feel behind. Even when you're moving, the finish line shifts every time you get close. Because it isn't a line, it's a horizon. You can chase it indefinitely and never arrive anywhere that feels like enough. Redirect the question, not how do I compare to them, but am I better than I was 6 months ago? That's the only comparison that has any actual bearing on your life. Everything else is noise dressed up as motivation. Availability bias. Your brain decides how likely something is based on how easily you can picture it, not how probable it actually is. Plane crashes are vivid, dramatic, shareable, so flying feels dangerous. Car accidents are quiet and constant, so driving feels fine. The math says the opposite. But the math doesn't show up as a story in your memory, the crash does. You feel most afraid of the things you've heard about most recently. The news cycle, the horror story from a friend, the one terrible outcome, they colonize your sense of risk. Before you make any fear-based decision this week, stop and ask yourself, am I scared because this is likely or because this is memorable? Then look up the actual numbers. Fear that can't survive facts isn't protecting you. It's just running you. Planning fallacy. You're not bad at managing your time. You're bad at predicting it. Those are very different problems with very different solutions. The planning fallacy means you estimate based on the best-case version of events, not the average. You imagine a straight line. Reality is always a winding path with 3 detours and a dead end you didn't see coming. Then the deadline slips and you turn it into a character verdict. You decide you're disorganized or lazy or not built for this. But the project didn't run late because of who you are. It ran late because every project does. Take your current estimate and double it, not as pessimism, as accuracy. Then treat the buffer as sacred, not a cushion, a commitment. Emotional reasoning. Feeling something strongly is not the same as it being true, but your brain treats it like it is. Emotional reasoning is what happens when the feeling becomes the evidence. You feel stupid, so you must be stupid. You feel like a burden, so you must be one. You feel like something terrible is coming, so you prepare for catastrophe. The emotion arrives first, and then the brain scrambles to justify it, not question it. You notice it as certainty, a gut-level sense that this feeling must be pointing at something real. It's hard to argue with because it doesn't feel like a thought. It feels like a fact. Here's the reframe. Feelings are data. They're not conclusions. The next time a feeling hits you like a verdict, say this out loud. I feel this, but feeling it doesn't make it true. Say it slowly. Let there be space between the emotion and what you decide to do with it. That space is where you get your choices back. The ego protection trap. Feedback doesn't feel like information. It feels like an attack. So you deflect. Explain. Find the flaw in their observation instead of your behavior. It feels justified. It never is. Every time you defend instead of absorb, you stay exactly where you are. The people who improve fastest share one thing: they separate their identity from their performance. The work can be wrong without them being wrong. Next time you feel that flinch, that urge to explain before you've even finished listening, stop. Say, let me think about that, and mean it. Give it 12 hours before you decide the criticism was unfair. Most of the time, it wasn't. The comfort zone illusion. Staying in your comfort zone feels like the safe choice. It isn't. Staying still has a cost too. You just don't receive the bill until much later. Comfort doesn't feel like avoidance. It feels like preference. But underneath it, your world is slowly contracting. The things you avoid become the things you can't do. The conversations you sidestep become the ones you fear. Comfort, unchecked, becomes a smaller and smaller room. You feel safe and somehow stuck at the same time. That tension is telling you something. Find one thing you've been calling not for me that you've never actually tried. Take one step toward it this week. Discomfort that lasts 30 seconds is not the enemy. It's the door. Confirmation bias. You think you look at evidence and form opinions. Almost always, you do it the other way around. Your brain picks a side first. Then it goes collecting. Every piece of information that fits the story gets kept. Everything that doesn't gets quietly dropped. You're not reading the world. You're curating it to match what you already believe. The worst part is that it feels like critical thinking. It feels like you're just being honest about what you see. But notice how rarely your core beliefs actually change, even when the facts do. So what do? Pick one belief you've held about yourself for years. Then actively look for 3 things that contradict it. Not to destroy the belief, just to see if it can survive the pressure. Beliefs that can't be questioned aren't convictions. They're cages. Subscribe if you want more content on actually getting stuff done instead of just feeling busy. Thanks for watching.